Greetings and salutations to one and all. Welcome to Psychedelics in the Seminary. I'm going to give folks a chance to come on in. So I'm going to probably start in about maybe, I don't know, 5 or 6 minutes, maybe 10. This is an event put on by Starr School for the Ministry and the Center for Multi-Religiosity. We're excited to have Courtney Watson here to speak to us about her own journey on the spiritual path with plant teachers and what we can learn from her. I'll give her a fuller intro in a little bit, but again, still giving people a chance to come in. So I know it's raining outside for a lot of folks in the Bay Area, so it might be a little hectic. Feel free to say hi to other participants in the chat section. If you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A section. I'll be picking from those in a little bit, but just giving folks a chance to arrive. Once again, Psychedelics in the Seminary. Doing it 1 second here. This is our first Psychedelics in the Seminary of this year. So excited. It's first one, yeah, for this year.
Okay, still, I'll take it.
Yeah, no, I'm excited to start with you, Courtney. This is, they can't hang with you. I don't want them to hang around.
Words to live by. I also feel the same way. You're my vetting process.
I mean, I'm trying to tell people, like, if y'all can't, I told my class, I was like, me and Courtney are just going to be kikiing. And then I was like, I have to explain what kikiing is. And I'm like, we just going to be chatting about the good, the bad, the ugly, the pretty, all of it together, This event will be recorded, will be put up later, much later. Well, I'm not exactly sure when, but take your time. Just know that we will be recording this. Again, if you have questions, comments, concerns, anything you'd like to say, please put it in the Q&A section, not the chat section. Chat's kind of just for if you see somebody on the attendee list you want to say hello to, yada, yada, yada. But I will be reading from the Q&A section in a little bit. Okay. I'm going to give it maybe 1 more minute and then we'll get started. That works for you. You staying dry over there, Courtney?
It says they can't see the attendee list and the chat is disabled.
Oh, thank you. I did not. Where did you see that?
In the Q&A.
Ah. Good chat. Let me see. This one should go. Let me see. Just switch chat to everyone. See test. Hoping folks can see that test.
I got that.
Hopefully that makes the chat available to everyone. The attendee list, I can understand if that's hidden. This is my Starr account, not my personal account, so things are a little different here. Regardless, let's get started. My name is Ayize Jama-Everett. I am an associate professor at Starr School for the Ministry, and I'd like to welcome you all to the first 2023 Psychedelics in the Seminary lecture series. I have been teaching a class called The Sacred and the Substance, off and on at Starr since about 2004, which looks at the role of psychedelics and plant medicine throughout the world. One of the best parts about that job has been being able to pull in some excellent thinkers, practitioners, healers, diviners and all scientists and all sorts of other folks into that class to supplement my paltry knowledge. As of last year, we decided it would be a good idea to share some of the guest speakers, not just with my awesome class, but also with the entire world. So Starr King, along with the Center for Multi-Religiosity, has sponsored this lecture series where I get to pick some amazing people from within the plant medicine and psychedelic space to talk about not only their lives and their roles in this space, but also their experiences with the religious, the divine, all of that stuff. We are here today with I want to call you more than a friend. I don't know what to call you, but my sister, ally, partner in crime, homie, great
That's
individual,
it.
like just person named Courtney Watson. I can sing your praises, and I will sing your praises, but why don't I just why don't I start with you introducing yourself? Anything you want to tell the group before we get going?
So I like to start introductions with who I really am, as opposed to letters and stuff, you know. So I am here on Ohlone Lejeune land. I am the descendant of enslaved Africans, Louisiana Choctaw, both of their colonial oppressors, and also like my white grandparents that are like, what the fuck, from like ancient Europe and shit. I am my ancestors' baby. I am a mother, I'm a daughter, I'm a sister, I'm a friend, I'm a lover, I'm a community member. I participate in all sorts of subcultures, whether that's kink or non-monogamy subcultures, you know, whatever. I am a queer Black woman that's trying to exist in this world and embody resistance in all the ways that I can to the systems and individuals that seek to oppress me. So I'm a warrior, but I'm a warrior through love. It's like love of my community and my people that really like lights my fire. Also love of myself. I have a fierce protectiveness of me in this body, because this body is a gift from a bunch of people that weren't able to protect themselves, or who, when they tried to fight to protect themselves, were murdered or tortured, or and so I hold on to this. I have the ability to protect myself in ways that my ancestors couldn't, and so I have a duty to protect myself and those I love around me. And then also, what else? I like to laugh. That's one of my favorite things, is like laughter. Joy and pleasure and rest are like my ultimate goals right now. That's what I want to do in life, is find ways to have every moment be through joy and through pleasure and rest. And pain is important. So like it could be some of that, but I'm a hedonist. I really want to decrease that as much as possible. Like give me just enough pain for me to learn what I need to learn, but no more than that. We don't need to have extra pain out here. We just want to live a good life. And until the next time.
I love it. Absolutely love it. I'm gonna do the colonial intro just because I feel like you earned your stripes. So like
I like to do it at the end, so like people can have all these judgments about me, and then they hear like everything, and they're like, "Oh, maybe I should have thought twice."
so I'm gonna give it to them now so that they just get a little bit. So Courtney Watson, MS, MED, is a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified sex therapist. She's the owner of Doorway Therapeutic Services, a group therapy practice in Oakland, California, focused on addressing the mental health needs of Black, Indigenous people of color, queer folks, trans, gender nonconforming, non-binary, and two-spirit individuals. Courtney has followed the direction of her ancestors to incorporate psychedelic-assisted therapy into her offerings for folks with multiple marginalized identities, and acknowledges the importance of Black and queer providers offering these services. Courtney spent most of 2019 training with the California Institute of Integral Studies Center for Psychedelic Therapies and Research to provide psychedelic-assisted therapy. She is deeply interested in the impact of psychedelic medicines on folks with marginalized identities, as well as how they can assist with the decolonized process for BIPOC folks. She believes this field is not yet ready to address the unique needs of communities of color and is prepared and enthusiastic about bridging the gap. She is currently preparing to be one of the few queer trans POC providers offering ketamine-assisted therapy in 2021. I think we've already done that.
Yeah, that's been accomplished.
Yeah, she's already did that. And she completed additional ketamine training at the end of 2020. She's also hoping to offer other medicines as they become FDA approved. Courtney Watson, welcome to
Thank you.
Starr King School for Ministry.
Excited to be here.
So Courtney, or should I call you Miss Watson? What do you prefer?
No, please. Courtney.
Courtney, you're one of the few Black queer women that I know of offering ketamine-assisted therapy. How did you come to this work and how's it going?
I came here because I got tricked by my ancestors. They were like, let's do this workshop on mental health. And then someone was like, who's interested in doing therapy with MDMA? And I was like, me? Like, that sounds cool. And then I went to a conference and I was not expecting it to be about psilocybin and LSD. And I was like, what the fuck are these people talking about? Because I came from a household where that's white people stuff, zero tolerance. My mom has zero tolerance for anything alcohol. So it definitely wasn't going to be anything psychedelic related. And I was like, why the fuck am I here? Can I curse? Because I already.
I think we're there already. So let's just go.
Okay. I can also kind of limit it if I need to, but not completely, but kind of. And so I just heard this voice that was like, just wait. And so I did, and I sat in those workshops and I was like, oh, like we need this. That's why I'm here. Like I'm a therapist and I'm looking around the people in the room and they're not going to be able to serve me and they're not going to be able to serve people that I know. And so like, oh, I'm here because I have a role to play. And I was psychedelic naive through most of my CIS training. And I wasn't necessarily eager to like jump into it. Like there's a lot of access because you have a lot of connections. But I knew the medicine that was for me was going to come to me and it was going to be clear. And when someone asked me what my ideal situation was, I said it would be a ceremony with all people of color. Ideally, it'd be all Black. And then I got through the grapevine, found out about an experience in a different country where I would be able to work with ayahuasca in an all Black ceremony. And so that is what I did. My first psychedelic experience was with ayahuasca in a different country. And it was amazing. It was intense. It was beautiful. It opened up a lot of gifts and it set me on a spiritual path that I've been looking for my entire life. And that is like actually African diasporic traditional practices. It was open a little bit, but it busted the door open after that ceremony.
And so then after that ayahuasca ceremony, you just had the motivation to open a ketamine clinic in Oakland?
No, I mean, I was still in the CIS training, and I was being harmed in that training. Like it was like, this is so hard. Like we are in these presentations and they're not thinking about Black people. They're not thinking of people of color. They're not thinking about queer people. Like it was so heteronormative. It was so cis normative. It was so not a place that felt inviting. And it wasn't malicious. It just was, because it was academic and academic is also all of those things. And so, yeah, I was just at the end of the training program, I was like, okay, someone asked what is CIS training. It's the Center for California Institute for Integral Studies. And then they have a year-long program for psychedelics. And so I did their psychedelic training program. And I was in this program and I didn't feel like I was going to be met I completed the training program and we couldn't do anything because nothing was legal. But the thing that is legal is ketamine. And I just knew that people needed to start having access to the medicine and the knowledge that um, I had just gathered, and ketamine was the way. So I was like, well, let's get trained in ketamine. And again, I got tricked because I thought I was going to do a ketamine training. And then I'm a generous person. I tend to be able to make connections with people. I had already had a group practice and I was like, do y'all want to get trained to do ketamine? Because I'm about to do it. And then they were like, yeah. So then we all got trained together. And then I was like, oh, we probably need a physician to like write our prescriptions so that we can offer the service. And they were like, yeah. And so then I got a physician and I was like, I don't feel comfortable. The client can take the lozenge and administer ketamine to themselves, but like, what if there's an emergency? I'm not a doctor. Like, this is very much on the edge, and I'm Black. Like, a lot of people can play on the edge. Queer Black people can't play on the edge. Right? We gotta be super safe about it. So I was like, well, maybe I can hire like an EMT or something like that to come in like for like shifts when we have ketamine medicine sessions. And I ended up hiring nurses instead, which was fine. And then I was like, huh. And then one of people started finding out, wanted to join. I was meeting with someone who's now one of our physicians, and he was like, so how'd you start your ketamine clinic? And I was like, what ketamine clinic? And he was like, Doorways. And I was like, Doorways isn't a ketamine clinic. We just got some therapists and doctors and nurses. And that's when it hit me that I had a ketamine clinic. So I got here because I got tricked. And I mean, and then once I realized what's happening, like, then it's like, okay, now let's do this because actually this needs to be here. And so then just kept on doing it.
And how is it going?
Uh, I am fortunate that I had a group practice. A lot of people start ketamine clinics just from the ground up without any other business. And so we haven't been operating in the red. We've been operating in the Black. Things are getting a little prickly. So I'm trying to figure out. I mean, my biggest thing was making the services accessible, and it's expensive for a reason. We started out at $4,500 for a round of treatment. Then we went up to 5,000. Then we went up to 55. And it's still not necessarily making ends meet. So we have to increase our prices again, and that's kind of what I'm sitting with. And so when we think about gatekeeping, because I do believe that ketamine is one of the routes to the sacred, right? Like gatekeeping around the sacred, how much of it is us that's doing the gatekeeping, or it's the systems that these medicines are currently available in that is doing the gatekeeping and requiring these services to be really inaccessible. So it's going, but it's not as accessible as I would like to be. And I'm still trying to figure out how to do that with a couple of options, at play.
I want to get back to that gatekeeping for a second, but for those joining who, maybe don't have a lot of experience, can you talk about ketamine and you say it's like it can provide an access to the sacred. What do you mean by that?
So I still feel like I need like 20 more years of experience to know what I'm talking about. But for what I know as of right now, these medicines take us out of this space, this reality, into other spaces and other worlds. And I think whatever happens beyond there, there's a lot of like, there's sacred beings, there's sacred energies, there's deities, there's angels, there's demons, like all that is out there. And while we're here, these psychedelics allow us a way to be here and also go into that space. And so a lot of people argue, oh, ketamine is a synthetic, it's not a true psychedelic. But ketamine is definitely a doorway into that world that a lot of the other medicines take you to through different places. That's what I got so far in my limited time here.
On planet Earth, you mean?
Well, I mean, even in the psychedelic fields, working with psychedelics, like I said, most of my life I haven't been doing psychedelics. So there's a lot more for me to explore and understand.
Which is a very it's a uniquely humble statement for someone in the psychedelic space to say. I've noticed a lot of people in the psychedelic space are have a evangelistic sort of approach to the medicines. I guess I'm wondering, you said, or I read in your intro, I'm trying to find it. You said you don't believe that this field is ready to address the unique needs of communities of color. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that, what you mean by that.
Yeah, just like we have unique sites of oppression that get activated by a lot of the ways that these medicines in the above ground. So I should say I work in the above ground. And I think it's a lot different in the underground, or it can be different in the underground. But in the above ground, it's very medicalized. It's very within the system of psychotherapy, within the system of medicine, within the system of pharmacology or pharmacy, within the system of like, it has to be medicalized. And those systems are inherently oppressive. Those systems are inherently problematic for trans folks. Those systems are inherently problematic for BIPOC folks. And if someone does not have that understanding or lived experience or in those communities with those identities, you're gonna hurt people because the system that through which this medicine is coming through is a system that already hurts people with those identities. So there's definitely work that can be done in terms of learning, but my place in this system is as someone that has lived experience. So I can say, oh, there's a crisis. Let's not call the police on this Black man who you just gave psilocybin to, because they might kill him. And I had to say that to my class, and a lot of people didn't believe me. And then George Floyd happened, and I got flooded with emails, And this is someone that did not take psilocybin. How would a police officer respond to a call from a frantic white woman who has been doing a psilocybin journey with a big Black man, and he's freaking out about slavery because she has in some way triggered him? I don't think that they're going to be like, we need to have a gentle conversation with you and calm you down. But those were not things that people around me were even thinking about when they were talking about what happens when something bad happens. They were like, call security, and if it gets bad enough, call the police.
And were those conversations you had as a student or as a visiting lecturer? Because I know you went back.
No, I had those conversations as a student, which is why I asked for my money back. So I was like, I did so much teaching in this. I had to teach every time I was there, every weekend. Excuse me, can you tell me how this is addressing the needs of this group or this group or this group? Or, something that happened where I was like, why are we not learning from anybody that's indigenous? That just doesn't make any sense. We're talking about medicines whose the ways that all of the people who are currently in the writing the white papers and in the literature, the way that they got that information was going to communities where they were sitting with indigenous elders who are transmitting this, either the medicine or the way of holding the medicine or whatever, and all of that gets erased. At one point, I was like, when I was in grad school, I learned that if you don't cite your sources, that's plagiarism. And if it's not common knowledge and it's not cited, that means that you're plagiarizing. And that was like a revelation that we all realized that none of these sources have been cited. And so all of this stuff is plagiarized, So yeah, that was constant. And that was the trauma part. That was the part that was hard. That's the part that was exhausting.
Gotcha. Just in hearing you talk and just knowing you, you seem to hold the spiritual and the psychological together very well. And I'm wondering, how's that? How did you get that skill?
I just didn't silence the spiritual. I think there's a lot of people that know how to hold the spiritual and psychological, and either through indoctrination related to their career, related to their culture. It's like we don't talk about those things. Like, isn't there a couple of things you don't talk about: religion and politics? right? So it's like even that idea of the way that you engage with people, or religion, politics, and money, these are things that you don't talk about, right? And religion is one of them. And so there's the silencing that happens. And for me, especially the deeper I connect with my bloodline and our medicine and our magic, there is no living separate from spirit for me. So I just don't silence it.
Okay. Is that the same answer if I ask you about it in connection to the sexual? Because, you've got that, sexual, I always get flummoxed when I talk
I
about this.
don't have a PG answer for that, but
How about a PG-13 answer?
okay. I am sexually free. I always have been. And so I also don't shut that down. Like why? I don't want to shut that down. Like I am a full person, and I think that this is kind of like that warrior element and that protection of myself. When I protect myself, I don't just protect the parts of me that are acceptable to society. I protect all of me. So that means I protect my sexuality. And protecting my sexuality means being able to express it. That means I protect my spirituality. And protecting my spirituality means being able to express it.
And there's been a lot of talk about sexual violations that have happened in the psychedelic space. I don't know if you saw that petition that was put out by the students at CIIS.
Oh, I did. Yeah.
And that's there's been that podcast, and that's been a hot topic in the psychedelic space. I think you're one of the few people uniquely positioned to comment on it as someone who studies sex and sexuality and is in the psychedelic space. I'm wondering if you have any words about that.
You know what? I'm uniquely positioned to talk about it, and I'd much rather talk about something else. I feel like not something else, period, something else related to sexuality and psychedelics and that sexual pleasure. Because I think it is important to name that sexual violations happen and develop processes for sexual violations to be decreased, because people are going to offend. There's only so much we can do. There's education that we can provide to people so that they're aware, so they can be informed about what they're experiencing, what they should not be experiencing. But that conversation has taken over so much of psychedelics and sexuality that no one is talking about sexual pleasure. No one is talking about the fact that you can have a psychedelic experience and it can be orgasmic, and that's okay without touch. Like I'm not talking about sexual touch being involved, right? And so this is just also how I operate as a sex therapist, as a sexual scholar, is I'm much more interested in being pleasure focused as opposed to like what is it? Pathology. So sexual pathology are people that offend. Sexual pleasure, I mean, that's more than pathology, but like it's more of a negative area of sexuality and psychedelics. And it's so big that like I've actually been in a conversation where we're talking about what people need to know as a part of the training. And I was like, people need to know that it can get sexual. And they were like, absolutely not. No, we can't talk about sexuality at all unless we're talking about, the only thing we can talk about is sexual violations. And I'm like, that is terrible. And it's also problematic. And it's also going to lead people to getting hurt. Because what is someone supposed to do with sexual feelings when they arise in a ceremony or in an experience, in a one-on-one? If the therapist isn't trained to manage their own sexual self and their own sexual biases, how might that get projected onto the client? If the client is kind of moving through sexual shame and trauma and coming to a place of like exploration and joy, but all the therapist knows is shut it down, how might they actually end up harming someone by shutting down a beautiful sexual expression? So I don't say that to be like, I don't want to talk about that, but I say that to say that there's so much more that we need to be talking about when it comes to sexuality and psychedelics.
Mm-hmm. Just a reminder to everybody, if you have any questions, please put them in the Q&A. Sure, we'll get to as many as we can towards the end. This is Psychedelics. I feel like I'm on NPR right now. Right? This is Psychedelics in the Seminary. My name is Ayize Jama-Everett. Again, any questions, put them in the question and answer, not the chat. That just helps us keep track of it. This is Psychedelics in the Seminary. We are speaking with Courtney Watson, founder, director of Doorway Therapeutics, and Access to Doorways. And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about Access to Doorways.
Yeah, so ketamine is expensive. It just is. And I'm dealing with the fact now that it's going to be more expensive. And I just don't think that people should have to pay. I don't think that people who are the most hurt, most harmed by systems of oppression also need to figure out a way to pay $6,000 for treatment that's going to help them heal from those harms and oppression. And so I looked at a bunch of different models and a for-profit when I was kind of thinking about how this ketamine clinic was going to go. And the only thing that I found was a nonprofit was going to be the way that folks were going to be able to get support. And so I started a nonprofit so that we could raise money for folks that are interested in ketamine who are BIPOC and queer and want to have ketamine treatment by BIPOC and queer providers across the country. It's not something that's limited to my for-profit. If anyone anywhere in the country has either of those identities and finds a provider that has those identities, then we want to be able to support them in getting the treatment that they need. And then also there's just not a lot of BIPOC and queer therapists that are offering psychedelics because tuition is extremely expensive. And so we're also raising money for tuition for folks to be able to participate in some of these training programs so that they can become psychedelic therapists as well. We have a carve out for research consultation, and then we also support community projects, which are projects related to psychedelics led by BIPOC or queer folks in the community who want to be able to use our 501c3 in order to get money for their project.
Wasn't there anybody else doing this work? I know the answer. I'm poking you, but wasn't there anybody else who was supporting people of color, queer folks in the psychedelic space?
Sure.
Could you name them?
I mean, that are BIPOC and queer?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's a lot of folks that are in the underground, like the Ancestor Project. There are, there's the POC Psychedelic Collective. Yep. There is, so SAGE was not founded by BIPOC and queer folks, but they currently have BIPOC and queer leadership. Oh, it's not SAGE anymore, it's Alchemy. Alchemy. Healing Realms is found, well, I think some of their practitioners are queer. Mm-hmm. So they're doing this work in the ketamine space.
Doesn't sound like there's a lot. Doesn't sound like there were a lot of people.
No, there's not.
Given that so many of these medicines come from Indigenous folks, come from people of color, why do you think there's such a disconnect? I know you mentioned finance, but it just seems, at least my experience, maybe I'm wrong, but like, you know, Oscar's so white, like psychedelics so white, you know, like, why do you think that is?
Well, because I think the ways that this work is accessible is in the underground, and the underground exposes people to incarceration, because we're talking about Black and brown people doing this. That doesn't mean Black and brown people don't do it in the underground, but you take a risk. Like, I work only in the above ground, and I work only in the above ground because I can't take that risk because I have children. And so I think that that is part of the barrier. One, the people that can talk openly about it, even if it is in the underground, are folks that are least likely to be incarcerated for this. And then also folks that are doing this in the above ground that have different identities, have gone through all of the thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars of training in order to say, if you arrest me, you also got to get to school because they don't want to tell me I could do it. That's my plan.
And you mentioned it a little bit, but I'm wondering, and it's only to the degree that you're comfortable, if you can talk a little bit about your own spiritual journey, and how you came to be comfortable, you know, administering, speaking about these medicines?
Mm-hmm. So my spiritual journey probably starts with Catholicism. I was raised Catholic, and my both of my grandmothers were extremely devout. My grandmother and my great grandmother were extremely devout. We're from Louisiana. Louisiana's a Black Catholic state. And I loved mass. I loved Catholicism when I was little. I loved asking. I didn't like that my teacher said that my dog was not going to go to heaven. I remember that. And she told me that my great grandmother was a sinner because we're all sinners. And I was like, she must not know my grandma because she doesn't sin at all. She's an angel. But I never experienced like religious trauma. And so I had a really positive experience being Catholic. And I went to Catholic school for 16 years, literally pre-K through the end of college. I was in a Catholic school. Um, and I asked questions. And I feel like my mother was protective because she kind of like set some boundaries around like slut shaming and stuff like that. But I remember I asked questions, and when I wasn't satisfied with what I was hearing in Catholic school, I looked at Islam because we had a class where we looked at world religions. So we got to understand and a feel for other religions. And then I started kind of just exploring from there. Like, oh, I like what Muhammad was saying. Jesus was talking about turning the other cheek, and I can't turn the other cheek for everything now. But Muhammad was like, oh no, if you come for me, I'm gonna come for you back. And I like that. And so I was like starting to look at Islam, and then, like really looking at some of the beauty of the Quran. And then I was like, I kind of moved into Buddhism and kind of like some of the teaching, and also like there was like some mysticism with Buddhism, at least in the ways that I learned it, um, that I was like really interested in. And I think like that was kind of the beginnings for me. And then I became agnostic. I was like, something's out here and I just don't know what it is. And that's above my pay grade. And when it finds me, it finds me. But I really hope that it's like something based in Africa. Like I really hope that it's something based in Blackness. And then through my ayahuasca journey, I came to like an African traditional religion. And I was like, oh, this is what I've been looking for my whole life.
Mm.
Oh, this is all of the information about like African connection to land and like magic and like oh, we have our own divinities. Like this is beautiful. And through that, it was like, oh, but this is also a completely different cultural context than what I know as a Black American. And then I came back to like Black American practices, like practices born out of slavery. And I'm like, oh, this deeply, deeply resonates. And that's where my home is. And also moving into another diasporic practice where it's under an African American house. So I can understand African spirituality in an African American context. And still have those roots and links. And then, who knows from there, but like, that's kind of like my spiritual journey. And the reason that I don't talk specifically about what I practice, I mean, if you know, you know, if you don't, you don't. But the reason that I talk openly about it is because it's so beautiful. How could I not? Like, I deeply love the earth. And I guess I should say I also study under Amazonian practices as well. And I have found a good place of study, but not necessarily like uh, a home fully. So like there are people that will like go to the jungle for months. Like I'm gonna go to the jungle for like 10 days, you know, but I can't be there for months or like 6 months or something like because I got kids. And so there's teachers that I work with under various traditions and also like hold where my home is. And that might change. I'm also like, all of this might change. My spiritual trajectory has changed so much that I don't think anything is set in stone. And I just allow everything to inform each other. And the reason I talk openly about it is because it is so beautiful. And how could I not? Because life is ceremony. Like my life is ceremony. I'm always doing something. I have white on my head for a reason today, actually, like completely unrelated to this class, it's like it is the way I move in the world. And so if I'm not talking about my spirituality, then I'm not actually talking about me.
Mm. How does your spirituality inform your approach to plant medicine and like working with clients?
Well, I think I'm still kind of figuring out the links between spirituality and plant medicine. I know that when I work with spirits, my ancestors show up. And when I work with plant medicine, my ancestors show up. I know that there's various divinities that show up. Um, and there's just no denying that. Like when there's just a through line, like one person is always showing up for me, or two people are always coming through. Um, and just leaving little tidbits here and there.
For the uninitiated, when you say your ancestors are showing up, can you just talk a little bit about what that means to the degree that you're comfortable?
I can see them, I can feel them, I can hear. Well, I don't see them because I don't want to see a face, but I can hear them. I can feel their presence. Like I see them through knowing that they're there. Like I just know that someone is right here. I can close my eyes and see someone holding their hands on my shoulders. So like if I'm in a working with plant medicine, that knowing, that seeing, that hearing is like sharper and clearer. It's not, am I making this up? It's like, oh no, somebody is talking to me very clearly. And so when I say they show up, they come, they make their presence known.
Mhm.
And that's true for my dead, the people that lived and existed before me and are the reason why I'm here. And that's also true for different divinities across like Black Pantheon.
Yeah, you just said a phrase that I'm going to adopt. You said "my dead,"
Hmm.
and there's something about that. I think a lot of people would call it ancestors, but one of the things I've just noticed especially with Black people and medicine, beyond Catholicism, Buddhism, Islam, whatever, ancestors seem to be a very present feeling. Ancestor worship, ancestor acknowledgement seems to really come through for a lot of Black people in doing this work.
Hmm.
And I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that as to why that might
They
be.
like, we have been waiting. Oh, we got an entry point. You can hear me now. Ooh, just come on. It's like they're always there. They're not there, but you can hear me. I'm definitely gonna say something to you. Hey, let me tell you this thing, right? Because now I know that you can hear me. And I
Mhm.
mean, that's just my belief. My belief is we walk with our dead no matter what. Like we can go our whole life without knowing that they're there, but that don't mean that they're not there. That don't mean that they're not intervening on our behalf. That don't mean that they're not showing up for us. But if you start working with medicine, then all of a sudden you can see them and they're gonna take the opportunity to let you know that they're there.
Mhm. I think that what you hold is so important because I think for a lot of folks, the experience of ancestors showing up, white, Black, whoever, might be seen as a schizophrenic episode or like a psychotic break, and that you have the capacity both as a therapist, and as a person in touch with their spirituality to sort of split the difference, to like
Well,
separate them.
honestly, I mean, I worked with schizophrenia a lot early in my career, and I always remember the first time I really started working with folks that were experiencing psychosis. I was like, oh, that is there. I just can't see it.
Mm.
I was very clear about that. No one was making anything up. It was real. I just couldn't see what they were seeing.
Mm.
And I wasn't experiencing what they experienced. And then once I started working with psychedelics, I was like, oh shit, this is what was happening to them. They just didn't have psychedelics, right? And so when we think about someone that's like maybe a little bit more disorganized with their psychosis, I think it's the inability to control when, like, I can turn it on and off, you know, with I work with this medicine, I engage with this spirit, and then I have this experience. They were having the experience without engaging with anything. And so for me, schizophrenia is someplace on the spectrum of lived experience in between these worlds where they just don't have as much control. And it can be, I can imagine how far, of course, you're struggling with mental health because there's no way that our society is set up to hold the fact that you're also in other places at the same time.
Mhm. We were talking about that in class today about how capitalism is a big limiter to the psychedelic experience, right? That if you can't go to work and have the experience, then the experience is seen as wrong. I want to open us up to any questions that folks have. Again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A section. Anonymous attendee writes, what do Black women need to know before starting this journey? Where do we start?
So I'm gonna give you a biased answer based off of my spiritual practices, and you need to start with your ancestors. Because before anybody else for you, your people is gonna be before you. That doesn't mean that your ancestors are the strongest, mightiest being in the world, but you are literally, if you think about a baby and a family system, like everyone surrounds the baby, they want to hold the baby, they want to give love to the baby. That's you. You are the baby of millions of people that are hella, hella, hella old, and some that just died, you know, but like it goes back. And so if you are their baby, that's why I say in my introduction, I'm my ancestors' baby. I'm the one that they surround and they coddle and they give love to. And sometimes they talk shit to, but I'm the one that they come to, you know? And so, and I know that if I need anything, I could go to them for that. That also means that with things that I cannot see, they will protect me because I'm their baby. No one's going to let a baby go and run off in the street. You know, someone might let a toddler, if they tell the toddler, I told you put that down, and you keep on putting it down, and then you hit yourself in the face with it. Well, I told you not to do that no more. Like they might do that in terms of that, those types of lessons, but they always for you. So the first place to start, according to my spiritual system, is with your ancestors. And then this is not, ghosts are not fake to me. It's not an unreal experience. And so when you open yourself up to hear or to see or to know or to feel, it's a very real thing. And so if I open myself up to listen to the message of my ancestors, they will tell me. There was a voice that said, just wait. It wasn't like I imagined something where I wanted no, a voice told me, just wait. That was my ancestors guiding and directing me down this path. Like they directed me to this room in this moment with that one phrase, you know? And so you allow them to guide you. Now you want to call in the ones that are well and wise. You want to call in the ones that have your highest good at heart. You want to call in the ones that will offer a hand of protection over you. You want to make sure that we have a lot of dead. We're not going to work with all of them. It's okay to say, I want to work with the best. I want to work with the best and the ones that are best for me. Right. And I want to be guided and directed by them. And then I just say yes. They say do this, and I'd be like, oh, okay. They say do this, and I'd be like, okay. They say do this, and I'd be like, damn. Okay. You know, and because I know that when I see a tree branch, they see the forest, right? And so I trust them to protect and guide me. And then it's also a relationship that you develop. So that's where I think that you should start. The other thing about, you said, what do Black women need to know before starting this journey is cultivate your discernment. There's a lot of people in this space, and there's a lot of people that are going to sound pretty, they're going to have all the right words, and they're not going to have your best intentions at heart. So you need to cultivate your own understanding of what works for you, and you need to trust yourself and follow that. And then besides that, your people will take you exactly where you need to go, because I can't tell you where you need to go. They'll be able to direct you on that path.
One thing, just from what I know of your experience, can you just talk a little bit about being in community? And like, how important is that?
Community is essential. And if you don't have community, call them in. Get a glass of water, put it by your bed, speak prayers over the water, tell the water that you want, that you're calling in your teachers and you're calling in your community, and leave it by your bed for 3 days. And then after that, you can give it to a plant that's living and thriving in your garden or around your home, or a tree. And call your people in, because this is not work to do alone. This is like not lone wolf stuff. And if you have difficulty trusting people, or you have difficulty existing in community, even if you find like a few people that you trust, it doesn't have to be a massive space, but a few people that you trust, I wouldn't recommend doing it alone. Community is everything. Ayize is in my community, you know, like, uh, I am not doing any unpaid labor, but I'm doing this because Ayize asked me for it. And without an issue. Without, I feel like this is the first time I might even talked about compensation. Not an issue, not a problem. Because like this is what community does. We show up for each other. But community also has the ability to check you too. I have given several people like, look, if I start acting crazy, strap me down to a chair and be like, what is the matter with you? Everyone has full a green light to do an intervention on me if things don't start sounding right. And so like, yeah, community is a space that you're accountable to. It's a space that you pour love into and you receive love from. You pour support into, you receive support from. And I really think that the Black folks, I don't know that we don't know how not to do community. And so, yeah, just go with that. That is within you around community.
Mm.
And if there's barriers, then do work to like try and get those barriers removed so that you can be in community and receive community as well.
Mm. Someone asked, do you find yourself, your folks, ancestors interacting with spirits of place in these lands? This is a very strong relationship for me as a white settler in Pomo lands, specifically in balance in relationship with my Northwestern European ancestors. How do you find this, especially in relationship with medicines?
So I have to read the question. The question is about, do my ancestors interact with the spirit of the land? Yes. My ancestors definitely, man, I went to Louisiana. So I have like 4 bloodlines that go back to Louisiana. I went to Louisiana and I set up an altar and I sat at that altar and then so many people came through and they were just like, oh, thank God we're home. And I was just like, kept on saying it over and over again in different, like, thank God we're home. Oh, it feels so good to be home. Like, so I think that our ancestors know land and place and the place of like land and place being home. And I think our ancestors, in terms of your question about whiteness, know land and place that is not our home or land and place that we might have taken someone else's home. And so the work that I'd love to tell white folks to do with their ancestors is find out what fucked up shit your ancestors might have done. And that applies to me too, because I have white ancestors that have done fucked up shit. And then see what you need to do to make amends for that. If you are on land that your folks have been actively involved in the stealing, right? Stealing of, or the displacement of, then how do you and your folks go to that land and make amends? Right. And even with the use of plant medicines, right? How can that be your inquiry in that moment? This ceremony is not about me finding out that I am connected to Christ consciousness. This ceremony is me looking at all the fucked up shit that we have done and seeing what I need to do to start making amends on this land in this moment, right?
Yeah, and it's so funny when you work with, especially white people who've done that work, their balance is just different. Mm-hmm. Right? They're able to say, like, yeah, you know, there's some fucked up shit that my people did. And not only have I tried to make amends, I'm actively making amends on a regular basis. Mm-hmm. And that's not the entirety of my life.
Right.
Right. But I think for so many people, you know, there's a lot of, and maybe you can speak to some of the, I call it culture vulturing. I don't know what you call it, but there's a lot.
Shirt that says beware of the culture vultures.
Right. Like there's a lot of people, in positions of power, with white skin, who use psychedelics as a way of appropriating different cultures, mm-hmm. Right? Buiti culture from Gabon, you know, Mexican culture from Oaxaca, right? Like Peruvian culture from the Amazon, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and like with complete, you know, headdresses and beads and rattles and the whole nine. I guess I'm wondering, as you know, as a person in touch with your own indigenous lineage, I consider African Americans to be indigenous to the United States. Mm-hmm. How does that rest with you, and how do you work with that? How do you work with that in the psychedelic space?
Stay away from that in the psychedelic space because I don't have the stomach for that. If those aren't my people. I like, speaking of community, I know who my people are. My people are the people that you mentioned, people that are like, man, we did some fucked up shit and I'm working on that. Like, yeah, you my type of people. Like, I could trust you. Like, let's talk. but the type of people that like go in and swoop in on communities and take and then don't give. Or like, I also wonder how much of that is you being afraid to look at what is in your bloodline. I don't understand why people don't work in their bloodlines. I study under Shipibo traditions, right? That's something, but when I do that in my bloodline. If I'm working and doing a plant diet, when I diet a plant, I dieted sassafras. Sassafras is the tree that's native to the Mississippi Valley. And my indigenous Louisiana Choctaw ancestors worked with that medicine. So I took what I have studied and participated in, and I did like a year-long apprenticeship. When I did that, I worked with plants that were also a part of my story too. I actually, it wasn't until a year and a half later that I worked with tobacco first, and then the next plant from the Amazon that I worked with was Bominsana, which was like almost a year later. But every other plant that I worked with during that time period were plants that were native to the United States or like specific to my bloodline. And so like I think that there's a way that feels like a cultural exchange, or like that doesn't feel like I'm taking this and I'm taking like, your thing, and like I'm, like it's not extra. And I also poured into those communities too, whether when I was there or when there was an emergency, like the beginning of COVID, like $1,000 off bat without even looking, and not as a exchange, but because the community was in need and I was in a place to support. And so I think that we really have to think about when we're working in different traditions. Are we working in those traditions to understand ourselves better? Or are we working in those traditions to avoid who we are?
Really, really great question. I mean, yeah, great question for someone to sit with. Someone's asking if you could explain what the experience is for a person coming to Doorways to have a ketamine experience. Is it multiple use? Is there therapy afterwards? How's it framed?
Yeah, so everything that's in the above ground kind of follows this MAPS model. MAPS is the Multidisciplinary Association for Psychedelic Substances. Science. And this is where all the MDMA is at, basically. And they've gone so far with FDA approval in the government that most of us are like following the same structure. And so we do 2 prep sessions, which are preparing you for having your medicine experience, telling you about ketamine, getting your intentions together. We do a ketamine session, it's a 4-hour session, and then we do integration and ketamine interspersed until you get to the end. So it's about 10 weeks. They're mostly prep and integration sessions. You have 3 ketamine sessions, 3 medicine sessions, and it's really psychotherapy heavy. It's not take this medicine and then go away and you're healed. It's like, take this medicine, let's see what's happening. Like, how do we apply these things that are coming up in your life? And so again, to make it cost effective, we have less medicine sessions and more therapy sessions because the medicine sessions are more expensive. And also we know that the therapeutic component is really important in having some of these outcomes that we're seeing in the research around psychedelics as well. So that's where the integration is. And I think about how that might be different in community, or communities where there's not psychotherapy after you have your medicine experience. But I think sitting at in the kitchen with grandma at the pot and you talking about what happened and her processing her experience, that is the integration. I think in these communities, prep and integration is before and after and just exists around. And like we actually have to make space for it because people don't have someone that they can go home and talk to psychedelics about.
Yeah, you've heard my rant before, but like I am not a fan of the term integration just because I feel like it's bringing up some old 60s, 50s, 60s stuff and putting it into this context, which is
really, I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, I'm not a fan of the term integration. I really like the term like meaning making.
Yeah, I know that.
I think we're so quick, during psychedelic journeys to like, oh, well, this means this, or like, oh, I saw my mother coming to me and she was licking my face. That must mean that I miss my mother deeply, or da-da-da. And I think in the middle of a journey, that's the last thing you want to do is like try and interpret anything. I think about like other communities, like in the past where it was like, your vision, your journey wasn't just for you. You said your vision, and other people help put context around it and say what it was, you know? So yeah, I'm always like, we can make meaning of this later. Right now, it's just like kind of experience it. But you know me, I'm biased.
No, I think that that makes sense. Like I use the term integration because that's the term that I was taught, but I think you're right, especially when it's not exactly what someone thinks it's gonna be. Like I think that when you ask the medicine to help you with something, it's gonna bring up the good and the bad, the beautiful and the ugly. And so you like, I really want a connection with people, but here's all the way that I push people away. And then that comes up in your life in at the time. And so it's like, oh, Valentine's Day just came up and you struggled, but also like you rejected this person, right? Not saying that you have to be with this person, but like, how is that pattern something that happens? And it's really interesting that that came up in the context of this experience or vision that you saw related to your ketamine. Like, how do we bring all of this together?
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely seen like meaning making and journeys that have happened weeks ago, months ago, years
Mhm.
ago, you know, and folks are like, oh, that's what that meant. And it's like, yeah, like, you know, kind of again, breaking from that capitalist model, there's no need to like, you don't have to have an automatic interpretation, right?
Mhm.
We get to wait, we get to see.
Yes. And also, like, the interpretation also can change. It
Mm,
can mean something in this moment that I need it now. And 5 years ago, years from now, I need something different. And it means something completely different, but it's still medicine for these two times, you know?
you know, Cardona writes, the problem is feeling comfortable with one foot in this world and one foot in the non-ordinary world is the caution that must be taken when talking about these things in a society that views mystical experiences as dissociation. And I think it's
Mm,
such a good point, given that we're, you know, this is, you know, for a seminary or for people, you know, religiously oriented, you know, how do we deal with a population, a percentage of the population that's going to be having mystical experiences when they take this medicine, like, or it'll be viewed as like a mystical experience. I think in the past we've kind of, at least in a Judeo-Christian context, we've limited who gets to have mystical experiences, right? Or whose mystical experiences we value.
mhm.
There's a way in which, you know, this psychedelic movement, I'm dubious on that term, but it kind of threatens that. I'm wondering if what you think about that.
It threatens who gets to have a oh,
Yeah.
I mean, I do think about what happens when everyone has access. I think it's going to be really chaotic. I think I think that's also one of the reasons why I want to get as many people trained as possible because I don't necessarily think that everyone should be happy. I don't think I get to decide necessarily who does or who doesn't, but I don't think it's going to be a good experience for everyone. I don't think it's going to be the right experience for everyone because our society isn't set up to hold it, right? Like I think that like we're talking about individuals having an experience that our society actively stigmatizes. Our society has no ways to support. And so, what do I think about multiple people having mystical experiences? I just lay down prayers, honestly. I just lay down prayers that it ends up being something that ultimately moves in everyone's favor. I think I lay down prayers that it's something that ultimately moves in the favor of the collective of the favor in favor of our ultimate healing and the favor of the ultimate healing of the earth. And I just kind of let it be that.
Mhm. You know, Nina asked a question that I usually hold to the end, but you know, I think this is the perfect time for it. As a practitioner and leader, what do you see as the most important role of the spiritual leader slash theologian in supporting this work?
Mm. Okay, so I'm actually like a nerd about religion. I love theology so much. I considered going to a seminary, but I couldn't find one at the time that wasn't just only Christian.
Ah,
Uh,
so come to Starr King.
huh?
Should have
Well,
come to
it's too
Starr
late now. I'm not getting no
I know,
more M's behind my name.
I know.
Um, but I would love for folks to do deep, like investigative work in different religious communities, practices about plant medicines. And it could be psychedelic plant medicines, or it could not be psychedelic plant medicines. Like, I'm interested in herbalism just in general. Like, I love the earth. I want to know about all the babies that she gives us and the ways that we can work with them, and like we're her babies too, the way that all her babies interact. But like, yeah, like let's do some research. Let's go in all the places we're not supposed to go and make all the connections we're not supposed to make, and then make them in audio books so I can listen to it. Because I love Brian's book and I'm still reading it. He might have an audio book. I love reading. I really do. I just don't have the time to read. But like, I think the place of theologian is to do the investigative work, to draw the conclusions that we need to be drawn so we can more understand the ways that psychedelics have been erased, specifically when it comes to Christianity. Like, what was the ways that the church sought to suppress this information? Because if we can, and this is my belief, the church's goal in going into communities of color was disconnecting them from their religious foundations, their religious orientation. Because if we can disconnect you from what connects you to spirit, then you have to come to us to get to spirit. And then coming to us also has a price,
Yeah.
your land, your people, your resources.
Yeah. For those of you who don't know, the book she's referring to is Brian Marascu's The Immortality Key. Great book. If you look on YouTube, you can find, he was our first speaker last year for Psychedelics in the Seminary, and I got to have an awesome interview with him as well. It seems as though we're gonna get into some fraught times pretty soon. It seems like,
Oh, I hope not.
okay, I mean, give me that hope, but it seems like if things are going legal or somewhat legal, actually, maybe that's a question to ask. Like, what's your view on like decriminalization versus legalization, that whole thing? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, definitely decrim over legalization, because legalization is putting the medicines into an institution under which they can be gate kept by the institutions that gatekeep every fucking thing else that should be free, like healthcare. Like, you want to not get sick. You cannot grow anything in your backyard without a license and give it to people. And you have to come into our institution and make us pay us a lot of money. The same thing is going to be true with psychedelics. You can't grow that yourself. You can't distribute it yourself. You have to go through us, and we're going to tax you. We're going to create licenses. We're going to create tests that are not going to be culturally competent. So like, a lot of people are going to fall off, and even being able to access it's going to create an um elite group of people that can provide this. So I'm definitely for decrim. What I think is going to happen is that they're going to try and legalize anyway, and then it's going to explode, because I don't think that the earth is about that. Like, I don't think that some of these plants are not to be messed with, and they will let that be known. And so I think that there's going to be harm that happens that's going to get out of control. I think that there are going to be negative experiences that happen that get out of control. And the thing is, the cat is going to be out of the bag. And people are going to know that psychedelics heal. And so even though the government is going to try and control and restrain, and this is my fantasy at this point, we're getting into the fantasy part. The government is going to try and control and constrain and like do all these things. People are going to do it anyway. And then people are going to start to say, why are you doing all of this bad shit to us? Like, and they're going to get together and they're going to resist. And then there's going to be like grandmas like making like psilocybin lemonade in their backyard and like having people over at the barbecue, and it's gonna be great. Like, I think that there's gonna be some chaos that happens, and my prayer is that it is swift. My prayer is that it is gentle. Like, I have this big fear about this war, this conflict, and I was in a journey recently, in a non-medicine journey, just like meditation journey. And an ancestor was like, it's not going to be what you think it is going to be. This is not a physical war that's going to happen. It's going to look completely different. And that gave me some hope, because I'm not down for like living in a nuclear winter. And it also gave me fear, because I'm like, dang, what the fuck? It's gonna be some whole other ass shit we can't even imagine right now. Like the hell. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it did, but you said you had hope. So
I do. I have hope, because
okay.
I also know that we have the ability to pray and ask for what we need. And I'm pretty good at my prayers getting me what I need.
Mhm,
And my prayers are for my community. Like, my prayers aren't for me. And I
mhm,
think if we pray collectively for each other, if we pray collectively for safety and provisions and comfort and luxury, rest, joy, pleasure, then in the hard times, times are hard right now, and some of us are still able to access that. And so that's
mhm.
my tool, love and prayer.
Jeff asked if you could say more about the psychedelic community associations around ketamine. You said briefly that you'd been challenged by someone that ketamine isn't a real psychedelic because it's synthetic, but is a bicycle not a real method of transportation just because it's manufactured and not grown?
Absolutely, I agree. And I think that, like, some people can get really snobby about psychedelics and like the classic psychedelics versus not, whatever. I'm new to this field, have it. I don't really care that much. But I can tell you about an experience I had with MDMA, where I was working with that medicine. Not actually, I wasn't working with MDMA, I was working with sassafras. And I realized that MDMA is the tree evolving to still be able to connect with us. So I believe that all plants have consciousness and they have sentience and they have spirits. And so, sure, there's the sassafras tree that's outside that looks like it's not moving, but I have MDMA traveling around in my pocket. And I actually believe that that's the spirit of the medicine making itself available to me outside of just being the tree outside my window.
Mhm.
And so, to me, sassafras or MDMA is tree medicine, because the biological origins that we get MDMA from is sassafras. Um, I don't think of psychedelics as just this thing that I put in some sort of taxonomy, and we've applied this nomenclature. And so that means that this is what that is. Like,
Right.
no, like
And
these plants and spirits have the ability to transcend that.
that even that nomenclature is so haphazard. I mean, like people seem to forget the fact that marijuana is a hallucinogen, right?
Mhm.
So is it a
Right.
psychedelic, right?
I'd be like, marijuana is a psychedelic experience for me. And I would say that. And then I was on Instagram, and there was like this thread on Black Twitter threads about like people and their edible experiences. And everyone is like, marijuana, it's like, it's a psychedelic. Like, this man was talking about how he had an edible and now his car turned into a spaceship and he was crying because he's not an astronaut. If that's not a journey, I don't know what is. That sounds like a psychedelic to me.
Right. So yeah, and it's like the things about like issues around dosage, around routes of intake. All of these things are things that we don't usually talk about when we're talking about these substances. And I think that granny, that granny making that psychedelic lemonade, right? Those histories of those folks, I think that's kind of the knowledge that we've lost by disconnecting from these earth medicines, right? That like older generations kind of knew how to modulate or increase a lot of the impacts of a lot of this plant medicine, but those were often oral traditions, right? Or they were, secretive traditions. Not everybody needs to know everything all the time, right? So hopefully, my hope is that we're coming back into some of that knowledge. Like I'm less excited about, Tech Bro 2.0 coming in with, psychedelics are us, here's a pill for your ayahuasca journey. But I'm more interested in opening up, allowing for some of that older knowledge, usually from women over the age of 50, connected to the land, that we're more open to that knowledge coming again, so that we might be able to do something a little different than we've been doing thus
Well,
far.
one of my favorite things about psychedelics is like in working with your ancestors is when you open yourself up to hear them, that knowledge isn't lost at all.
Mhm.
You just got to trust that what they're saying, telling you to do works. And so this makes me think about the honey pot.
Mhm.
You know, the honey pot, the vaginal cleanser.
Mhm.
Okay. So that woman,
For the audience.
so it's this well, it's a foam. So there was someone that kept on having recurrent bacterial vaginosis, and she had a dream, and in her dream her ancestors gave her a recipe to cure her BV. Bacterial vaginosis is also known as BV. And so they told her it's really important, write it down. And so she wrote, as soon as she woke up, she wrote down the ingredients that that ancestor had given her in a dream. She put it together and it cured, it maybe not cured, but it helped get rid of her BV. And from that formula, she ended up making a product line. And that product line became the honey pot, which you can buy at Target. They have a bunch of different products, but the original foam cleanser was based off, the recipe has changed now, but it's based off of the original formula that her ancestors gave. That information to me is not lost. We just need to be able to open up so that we can hear it. And so like that's part of the work that I want to do. Like when I say that I offer ketamine assisted therapy, later on MDMA, maybe psilocybin, I don't know, somebody else could do that work. But to remember, like to bring pieces of myself that have been fragmented because of oppression, because of intergenerational trauma, because of the experiences of my ancestors, and also to remember, because they will tell me, like, I don't need to do 23andMe. I was in a journey and they showed me exactly where my people is from. So as far as me, as I'm concerned, I know just like whoever did the 23andMe test, I know where my people are from. And I think that that's something that's beautiful that the medicine offers us is to be able to connect and tap in with that lost knowledge.
I want to give folks one more second to have any questions. Please feel free to write it in the Q&A. Courtney, if you had anything that you wanted to make sure up and coming seminarians, people of religious mindset who are interested in getting into the psychedelic space, anything you think it's essential for them to know or to carry with them, what would you say it would be?
So maybe I don't know enough about who's coming to Starr King, but my bias is automatically associating folks who are being trained around religiosity to also be trained in sex negativity or shutting it down. I'm not sure if that happens at Starr King or not. But I would implore folks to be open to the sexual experiences that happen with psychedelics. And if there's any sort of fear or any sort of like internally shutting down that happens around that, to explore that, because I think sexuality also gets to be a part of the sacred and not in some like appropriative, like tantra way, like really like how does your sexuality connect you to your divinity? How does that connect you to the divine? And that's true for a lot of different sites, but I just know that in my understanding of the ways that sexuality is taught, it's like there's religion and there's sexuality, because there's the Madonna whore complex. You're either a Madonna or you're a whore, like saint or sinner. And sexuality is always in that whore sinner camp. And so like, how can you allow psychedelics to help you find the bridge? And then how can you bring that through whatever ministry you have, and the services that you offer as a religious leader?
I think religious leader or not, I think it's a great thing for everyone to keep in mind. As always, you are brilliant and amazing, and I want to thank you for spending your time with us here at Starr King School for the Ministry and the Center for Multi-Religiosity. I am Ayize Jama-Everett. I have been speaking with Courtney Watson, founder of Doorway Therapeutics, an awesome woman of multiple talents and amazingness. Happy to be in community with her now and forever. We will be continuing this series next week. We'll have Maria Maravingian, I always say her name wrong, her last name wrong, Matavorainji. She actually, I'm trying to put her, sorry, Mangini. That's why is that hard? Maria Mangini. I don't know.
Last name.
I know. I suck. All right. For some reason, it's not letting me cut and paste her bio in. But Maria has written extensively on the impact of psychedelic experiences shaping the lives of her contemporaries. and has worked closely with many of the most distinguished investigators in the field. She's the founder of Women's Visionary Council, a nonprofit that supports investigations into non-ordinary forms of consciousness and organizes gatherings of researchers, healers, artists, and activists whose work explores these states. Her long history with the Haight-Ashbury Free Clinic includes having been a barefoot patient, a lead clinician in the medical section, and the chair of the board of directors, all in the same lifetime. She's absolutely amazing. She'll be doing a presentation, a visual presentation on the history of LSD in the Bay Area. Absolutely amazing. Please come back next week, 5 to 6:30. Hope to see you all there. Please tell your friends. Links are on the Starr King website and all around. Courtney, do you want to put if people want to follow you or get more information, you want to put your info in the chat? I can always be found at Ayize, Jama-Everett at sksm.edu, and can follow me on Instagram at Ayize Jama-Everett.
If you'd like to support either clients receiving psychedelic therapy or therapists in training, we're also taking donations at the Access Doorways website, which we fixed the bug that had the website down for like 2 months, 3 months. So the website should be back up as of today.
Awesome. Thank you all for coming. Courtney, thank you for being here. With that, I'll see you all next week.